online and the rest of us here right now. So I'd like to start off with approval from the March 5 committee meeting minutes. You should all have a copy of it or had a chance with it. Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move approval of the minutes for March 5th.
Do we have a second? Representative Roth is a second on it. So everybody in favor of approval for March 5 committee meeting minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No one? Minutes are approved. Okay. Let's move on to the hearing for Senate Bill 455. Can I get Nick to explain that one out to us?
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So committee, Senate Bill 455, this would amend a statute that you've heard about before. This is the KSA 66-1239. This is the statute that authorizes a public utility to seek a determination of rate-making principles and treatment prior to that public utility constructing or acquiring a stake in a transmission or generation facility. So what this bill would do is provide that if one of these rate-making determination proceedings involves the abandonment or retirement of a fossil fuel-fired electric generating unit, the bill would then prohibit the State Corporation Commission from approving that abandonment or retirement, from allowing that utility to abandon or retire that facility, authorizing or prohibit the commission from authorizing the decommissioning of that unit, or taking any other action that authorizes cost recovery for abandoned costs relating to that unit, unless the commission finds through evidentiary support that the utility will replace that unit with new electric generating capacity that's sufficient to meet the minimum reserve capacity established by the Southwest Power Pool. That the unit that is being replaced is a dispatchable unit, and it also will maintain or improve reliability and resilience of the electric grid. Also, that evidentiary support must find that the abandonment or retirement of that fossil fuel-fired unit will not harm utilities' ratepayers or decrease the utility's regional rate competitiveness. And as part of this, the utility would be required to demonstrate that cost savings or avoided or mitigated costs will occur due to that abandonment or retirement. Lastly, the evidence must support that the retirement or abandonment is for economic purposes and for the benefit of customers, and it's not for the purpose of achieving environmental, social, or governance goals, unless it's otherwise required by that abandonment is required by federal or state statute. I will note those provisions I just provided regarding the evidentiary support that must be found to abandon or retire a electric generating unit, fossil fuel fired unit. Those provisions under this bill would expire on July 1 of 2034. So there is a sunset provision for those items. In addition, Senate Bill 455 would also authorize public utilities to retain coal-fired electric generating facilities to provide additional capacity. So under this provision, if the Corporation Commission finds that it's just, reasonable, and necessary to do so, that public utility may retain that coal-fired generating facility in their rate base, recover operating expenses for that facility, and then recover other expenses that are necessary to, as I said, operate at that facility at a low capacity factor, essentially to provide additional capacity while that facility is remaining offline during most normal operating conditions. So one other thing in this bill is the KCC would be required to report on retirements that are occurring with electric generating facilities. This would be an annual report. So this report must be provided to the legislature, and it would include the number of utility requests to retire electric generating units, the nameplate capacity of those retirements, and whether the commission approved or denied that that excuse me. Sorry about that. So whether the commission approved or denied that request. Also in this report, that report must denote the impact those retirements have on the utility's generation fuel mix, the capacity reserve margins, and then the need and whether there is a need for additional capacity due to that retirement. Lastly, on this report, the KCC shall note and report whether that retirement results in any stranded costs that must be recovered through the utility's ratepayers. Lastly, Mr. Chair, this bill, this is the same provision that was in House Bill 2527. This extends the amount of time that the KCC has to make a determination of these rate-making principles and treatment. So under current law, the KCC has 180 days. This would bump that up to 240 days. And then as part of this increase in time that the KCC receives, the bill does encourage the KCC to expedite the process and complete the proceeding in a lesser amount of time, and to expedite the process in furtherance of that goal. The bill would require that if a utility does intend to file a petition to seeking one of these proceedings, it must notify the KCC 30 days prior to it submitting its petition. And then once the KCC receives that notice, the KCC would notify all the parties and interveners who were a party to or an intervener in the utility's last rate proceeding of the incoming determination proceeding. And then if there's some other procedural guidelines, so interventions have to be within 10 days once that proceeding starts, and then the KCC would have to adopt a procedural schedule within 30 days. Mr. Chair and committee members, if this bill is enacted, it would take effect on July 1, 2024, and I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you very much, Nick. Committee, any questions? Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Who requested, I know it says House Utilities, but was there a group that asked for this bill?
I'd have to look on, I think the website might have that requested by information. It is not published on the top of Senate bills like it is on House bills, though, but I can check on the website and see who it was requested by in committee or find that information for you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good question. I think we'd all like to have that information, Nick. Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Nick. Nick, if a facility is retired and we have to build something to take its place, does that have to already be made, or do they have 5 years to get it in place, or is there a time limit or anything like that? Thank you.
So this bill doesn't get into those exact details. The KCC would in one of these proceedings, when they're evaluating whether that utility can retire a facility, would be taking all that into account. And part of this bill is requiring that utility to have sufficient generation capacity ready to run online if they're going to retire a facility. So it probably would have to almost be kind of a commensurate thing that happens.
Representative Carmichael.
Mr. Chair, the legislative website reflects that Senate Bill 455 was requested by someone named Laura Lutz on behalf of a company called Evergy.
That is a correct statement. You beat me to the punch there. How do you spell the last name? Oh, TZ. Okay. Thank you very much. But no, to answer your question, Representative Neighbor, it was Laura Lutz and Evergy. Thank you. Further questions for the reviser? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Nick. So first up, we've got Jason Clint with Evergy. Welcome to the committee, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, and Ranking Member. My name is Jason Clint. I'm Evergy's Senior Director for External Affairs. For informational purposes, that same Laura Lutz told me that I should let you know that not only is this my first appearance before this committee, but it is also my birthday today. And she said it is the tradition of this committee to take it really easy on those conferees. So I thought that was important to note as we start.
Would you like us to sing you happy birthday?
I would. It's up to you, Mr. Chairman. It's your committee. But this bill really is about reliability. We are very proud of our workhorses. It's important to note that when we talk about our coal-fired, our natural gas, and our nuclear generation facilities, these are baseload workhorses that have provided reliable, dispatchable energy sources. And we are not simply looking to quickly replace those. In fact, as this committee knows, we are currently looking to add more baseload resources. So I wanted to make sure that we understood that this isn't a rush to get rid of any coal. It's not an urgent need, and as others will testify, this bill is largely what happens today in front of the commission in both of these instances. I view this kind of as a policy statement bill, and the bill really has two parts because it was two separate bills. 455 was introduced by Evergy. The other part of it is 456, which was introduced by the State Chamber of Commerce, if I remember right. So the first part of the bill allows for fossil fuel plant to run less but still be available during the winter and summer peaks as needed for reliability. It would have a positive impact on rates. Even though the facility is already in rate base, there would be lower fuel costs, fewer operations and maintenance costs, and fewer labor costs, while at the same time ensuring that that unit is available for reliability purposes and to help meet our required reserve margin at the Southwest Power Pool. This is a tool that provides flexibility with how Evergy manages its generation fleet. As we learned in Winter Storm Uri, there are times when baseload generation is essential. As you know, our coal plants essentially operate as battery backup for our renewables right now, and we can't fully retire those coal units until some other form of reliable generation is available. There's nothing like a 45-day supply of fuel on the ground. So Evergy continues to support the above all energy mix. Our concern is that without this legislation, outside entities would be able to force a coal plant to shut down because it's not running very often. We need to maintain a reasonable pace and not rush our way to 100% carbon-free generation. Kansas should do what it can to help keep these fossil fuel assets in service, if only for reliability, until we can retire them. The second part of the bill, and this is really what 456 was about. I think it was actually introduced in the House as well. It was 2620 in the House, if I remember right. It establishes a commission process for the retirement of fossil fuel electric generation units. Coal-fired generation in particular is under fire from federal regulators. While we want to continue to have the option of running our coal-fired plants, we also don't want to put Kansas in jeopardy of being unable to retire generation if required or in the best interest of our customers. This bill would set up a predetermination proceeding where the commission would make any retirement make sure that any retirement is not going to harm customers and that the utility can continue to meet its resource requirements at the Southwest Power Pool. That portion of the bill also has a 10-year sunset on it. That was put on there because, as you know, technology is ever evolving, and we wanted to make sure that something that we are worried about today may very well be very different 10 years from now. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't putting ourselves in a situation where we couldn't respond to those needs. So with that, Mr. Chairman, we're supportive of this bill because it's in the best interest of the utility and its customers to retire baseload only when it becomes economically prudent to do so and reliability is assured. And with that, I'll be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you very much, Jason. Any questions? Not seeing any. Appreciate you. Hold on one moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One question. When you say outside entities could force a coal plant to shut down because it's not running very often, how do they cause that? Could you kind of lay that out as to how you guys don't make that decision and somebody else can cause that? Thanks.
In a proceeding in front of the commission, an entity could come in and say that this coal plant isn't running often enough. It should be taken out of rates. And so that's how they would create that argument by making a petition to do that. We have seen that in other states. That's not unusual or unheard of.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Representative Berquist.
Happy birthday, sir.
Oh, there you are. Thank you. I just want to again remind you that I was told the tradition here.
Any further questions? Thank you again. I appreciate it. We're going to get out of order just a little bit here. Eric Stafford, don't see you, but I know you're out there. You're hiding in the back. I think you have a Senate meeting coming up pretty soon too, don't you?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. We have a hearing on corporate income tax apportionment, which is as oftentimes riveting as coal plants. Yeah, we have that at 9:30 this morning. I appreciate you accommodating us. We are here to speak in support of Senate Bill 455. The base bill was one that was introduced by Evergy, as it was pointed out, I think, by Representative Carmichael. But the Senate committee merged 456, which is the companion to House Bill 2620 that we had introduced earlier this year, trying to give stronger and more clear direction to the KCC on when it is okay to close a fossil fuel facility. The language that is in the bill before you is different than House Bill 2620. That is language that we did work out with Evergy. They had some concerns with the rebuttable presumption. They had some concerns with some of the other provisions in there, but we worked those out with Evergy, and we're pleased that we can stand here in support of this one today. So thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I'd be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Right. Committee, any questions for Mr. Stafford? Not seeing any.
Thank you.
You have fun on the Senate side. So.
All right, we'll do.
All right. Next up, somebody I've been trying to get to the committee to talk for a long time, Mr. Zakora. Welcome so much. I don't know if you've spoke to us or not, maybe just a little bits here and there. But
I have not this year.
there you
I've
go.
been in the past years, but it's always a great pleasure and honor to be here. And I always want to start out by saying there's no committee in anywhere that has done more for retail ratepayers than this committee. This committee has been great for retail ratepayers throughout Kansas. They've addressed the competitive nature of retail electric natural gas rates. They have addressed lowering the rates by eliminating the state income tax, which was an automatic reduction in electric rates. And at every turn, this committee has supported retail ratepayers. I'm very grateful for that. Am I doing something, or is this? Can I continue?
Is that maybe coming on from, is that background noise from the online stuff? Okay.
Okay.
Well, go ahead and try
Can I
it again.
continue?
Yeah. Is your mic on now?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
It's not, it's red anyway. Is that the, okay. I want to echo what Eric said. We, as part of what we did, these kind of bills that are before the committee today are widespread throughout the United States. And what we tried to do was to essentially look at all of those and get what are the best features of those bills. And we worked with the commission, the KCC staff, with Kurt, who are in here in the room today, with Sierra Club, who was here, Evergy. I don't mean to leave anyone out, but to the best of my knowledge, all of the stakeholders were involved in this, and we were able to come to a consensus to present to the committee this bill today. Now, my prepared oral remarks are as follows. KIC and CLEAR, which I represent, Kansas Industrial Consumers in Kansas for Lower Electric Rates, appear before the committee as proponents of SB 455. It's our recommendation that the bill be favorably passed by the committee. The compromise bill has been the subject of numerous shareholder meetings, and we have participated in all of those meetings. SB 455 is a straightforward approach to ensure the fossil fuel generating assets that customers have paid for will not be prematurely retired or abandoned without thorough consideration by the Kansas Corporation Commission. And I would note that we have great confidence in the capabilities and the resolve of the KCC to address those issues. They're the right people to address the issues. The bill states that the utility replace the abandoned or retired facility with dispatchable power. That was one of the questions that was raised here. The retired facility shall not cost customers more than simply continuing operation of the facilities. That was one of the points that was alluded to by Jason Clint as well. SB 455 simply provides certainty to all stakeholders, including customers, that Kansas will have sufficient generating resources in the future. It has a 10-year sunset provision. In our view, SB 455 simply provides, SB 455 is a retail ratepayer protection bill. SB 455 is also an economic development bill. SB 455 is a retail ratepayer protection bill because it does not permit the closing or retirement of an electric utility generation plant, except on a finding by the Kansas Corporation Commission that any closing or retirement will not harm Kansans. The bill does not permit the retirement of a facility if such retirement would increase costs to retail ratepayers. The bill does not permit retiring a facility if such retirement would jeopardize the continuous, reliable provision of electric service. Why this bill is needed in Kansas is in part based on the integration of the abundant renewable energy resources into the overall mix of the electric generation portfolio in Kansas. I think I've told everyone in this committee, Kansas is the envy of almost all the other states on the issue of total energy supply and renewable energy, which is carbon free. The bill recognizes the ability to meet peak day electric demand of Kansas is primarily based on the ability to dispatch electric generation when it is most needed. These are some statistics I would offer to the committee. Wind and solar can be effectively integrated when they're available. And in Kansas, in 2022, wind was 47% of the total annual generation volume in the state. But they are not dispatchable electric generation resources. Am I still on? Because I don't hear it. Okay. When wind or solar are unavailable and when peak day demand occurs, you have to have nuclear, coal, and natural gas in order to meet peak day demand. SB 455 provides a framework for the continuation of a system where Kansans can benefit from Kansas-sourced wind energy without sacrificing highly reliable electric service. Should I continue?
Good. Jim, can you guys hear me okay? Would you mind taking one of the empty seats that has a microphone, or down to this table, we can use that microphone because that might help. Try either one. I don't really care. I don't know what's going on with it. Go ahead, Jim, and sit down. I want to make sure the mic works for you. Okay.
Is this mic working? Okay.
Problem is you have to get down. You're too far away from it. Just have a seat. Have a seat.
Now? Okay. Let me back up a moment here. SB 455 provides the framework for the continuation of a system where Kansans can benefit from Kansas-sourced wind energy without sacrificing highly reliable electric service. I think these are important statistics for the committee. The Wolf Creek Nuclear Generation Facility provided 14% of total electric generation in Kansas in 2022. Wind provided 47% of the total generation. Both of these resources do not emit carbon. SB 455 furthers this effective operating protocol that assures reliability, uses Kansas-based resources to the maximum, and provides a moderating influence on wholesale electric price. I'll take one final moment to address specific ratepayer concerns. All of the coal-fired generation facilities and natural gas facilities of Evergy in Kansas are in the rate base of Evergy, on which retail electric rates are based. The coal generation facilities of Evergy in Kansas have remaining undepreciated rate base that exceeds $2 billion. Retail ratepayers do not want to be in the position of paying for electric generation that is retired and not serving the public. SB 455 provides a process of the KCC that will assure no retirement of coal-fired generation plants will occur without an in-depth analysis by the KCC that provides protection for retail ratepayers, protection of both their economic interests and protection of their interests in reliable electric supply. And I would be available for questions, and it's a great honor to be before you. I've spoken to many of you separately, and it's great to be here before you as a group.
Absolutely. Committee questions? Mr. Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Zakura. I know the bill is kind of where it started from, but it speaks specifically to coal-fired generation. Would you be opposed if it included nuclear generation as well?
Oh, I have not considered that. Nuclear is very much different. The bill, sir, as it's drafted, includes fossil fuel generation, which would be natural gas and coal. Nuclear has been a great resource for Kansas.
And it's a baseload generation, just like coal is.
Some of the statistics, essentially the Wolf Creek facility operates at 100%, except the time that it's refueling. So it's been the workhorse of electric generation. I would certainly say that we would support whatever measures that would take for that economically valuable resource to continue.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Zakor, for being here today. We're going to get a little off topic for a second, but Mr. Chairman, you keep bugging me about capers and capers reforms. We have the chair of the capers board with us today. If you would like to have that discussion with him during committee.
Is there an update on that?
Well, what I would say is being on the board of trustees of capers is a great joy of my life. Yeah. There's nothing better than being a steward for people who have spent their entire life in public service.
I'm just going to be sure to pass the chairman your phone number so he can bug you for.
Oh, I've got his phone number. Further questions? Okay.
Thank you.
I am curious. I know we in the Senate side they rolled 456 into 455. Any comments on the combine? And then also, before we get into that, I was wanting to pass out a balloon that we've got here, but we were waiting on the printing to stop. Nick, do you have that available? If you could. And then if you wanted to talk about 456 at all, I would appreciate it. Not you, Nick, but rather Mr. Sakura. So
we're certainly satisfied through the negotiations of the combination of the two. We are firmly in favor, obviously, of the continuation of the fossil fuel plants. And let me just give you an example why that is. Thank you. Why that is the case. Evergy is looking at building a gas facility now, and those facilities are expensive. They're needed, but they're expensive. One that's being built in Louisiana, I believe it's Louisiana, of Evergy, is $1,250 a kV. So a 650 megawatt plant is $800 million. So to the extent that the coal and fossil fuel plants can continue to operate, that's a really good thing for retail ratepayers until they get to a point where they're no longer economically beneficial. The issue that Mr. Clint spoke to about the coal-fired capacity issues is that, as he so correctly stated, the coal and natural gas facilities essentially follow the wind availability. When wind is available, you use the coal and natural gas facilities less. When wind is not available, you use them more. Wind tends to be more available on a seasonal basis through April, let's say January through April. When you get into the summer, there is historically less wind, and the coal and natural gas facilities, and of course the nuclear facility, are called on to carry the load for continually reliable electric service. Some entities have suggested that the coal facilities, one or more, could be closed. We do not agree with that. And the reason that I would say that is that, if you get into that period in the summer and peak demand, you'll see the coal facilities operating at 80 to 90% of capacity. So they're critically needed, and you could not have reliable continuous electric service in Kansas without them. So we're comfortable the way the two bills were merged. We believe it contains the best of both. We did our best to really canvass the country and look at the legislation and bring to you what we thought was the best of the various bills that are being considered. And to the comment that was made, one of the critical parts of this bill is that the KCC is instructed to not approve a retirement of a plan if it would put reliability in jeopardy, which we believe to be really the case if those plans close. The final thing I would want to say, which I tried to say earlier, is we really do have the best of everything in Kansas. We have the renewable resources, we have a fossil fuel base and nuclear. I think the only nuclear facility in Southwest Power Pool at this point. And we have the best of everything. And the trick is how we use that to the benefit of everyone in Kansas, from residential users to businesses, how we get business to expand, how we use this remarkable resource that we have here for the benefit of everybody in the state.
Okay. Further questions? Representative Turner.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. I appreciate your testimony. In the interim this summer, we heard basically that the SPP buys wind because on the daily market, of course, it's the cheapest for various reasons that we won't talk about now. And that has taken the coal plants out of their traditional role of being base load, turn them on, run them full out kind of units. So as you say, they're following the wind now. Okay. So this bill, though, I guess I'm just curious of the dynamics of the decision making, because this bill seems to step through a fairly common sense progression of things that you would consider. But we need to put in statute those things because otherwise other factors would be considered other than those economic, other than those reliability. Is that the reality out there?
Yeah, yes, it is that there are the energy business, particularly the electric energy business, is in transition. And we don't have any really clear view in a lot of areas. So what this bill does was to kind of set a path that will keep Kansas in the middle, that we would have reliable service at competitive rates, because there's a lot of forces. I would say the primary force would be EPA regulations. And it's always hard for people to understand why the EPA is even regulating energy. You would think that's FERC, but that does occur. But that's the primary unknown factor, and we're dealing with that. And what I would say also is Kansas is way ahead of all the other states in emission reductions. With our geography and all the wind we have, I think Evergy's latest statement says that their emissions are about half what they were a decade ago, because you've seen a ramp up in wind, and coal, as you said, is load following. SPP talks about that as economic dispatch of the fuel stack. So wind is always going to be dispatched first because wind is free fuel. And that puts coal and natural gas in a load following, but an extremely important position, because they have to carry there's not a day in the entire year that we don't rely in some manner on both the coal, natural gas, and nuclear facilities. Every day, every hour, we rely on them to some extent.
Okay. Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Sikori. Tell you're a gentleman. You were saying that the wind produces maybe 47% or so. How about the solar? What number did you give on that one?
I did not give a number. First of all, the 47% is a figure from the U.S. Energy Information Administration. So it's a very reliable figure. Our solar, I believe, is under 200 megawatts. It's almost negligible in Kansas. One thing I would tell the committee in the SPP, what they call the interconnection queue, there's 165 active projects in Kansas. Most that would include wind, solar, battery, and some kind of hybrid process. I believe solar is the leading technology in those that are in the interconnection queue. And SPP would say that about half of those projects will ultimately be built. So I think you will see in the coming years more solar. You're probably going to see more wind. Well, you've got to see more wind and solar because Grainbelt is building a 5,000 megawatt facility that originates in Dodge City that would take Kansas sourced wind to Missouri, Indiana, and Illinois.
Yeah.
So the production of renewables in Kansas will continue. But sir, right now we have almost no solar. It's almost 100% wind.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Just to follow up for Representative Smith, as we sit here, the wind is sitting at about 43%. You can look it up live anytime at spp.org. If anybody has questions on that, we do have a little bit of solar going, but it's not much. So, okay, further questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Zakor. I do appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I hope I didn't break the microphone system.
No, you are a wonderful asset too. So you're a wealth of information, and I do rely on you quite a bit. So
thank you so much, and thank you to all the stakeholders who worked to get this bill in the fashion that it is today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Body, we did pass out a balloon amendment. We are not working the bill right now. We're just hearing it, but I wanted you guys to have the information available as we go through the discussions. So, and I don't know if you wanted to make any comments on that or not, totally up to you.
If that's okay, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm sorry, committee. I was up late last night working on a committee report. So just real fast, Mr. Chairman, and then I might have to get out of here to go take care of that committee report. This balloon, the primary change, I'll just cover the primary changes. On page 3, this would remove the requirements that the replacement of a facility that's being retired or abandoned have to be amount of generating capacity that's equal to or greater than what the SPP is requiring, the capacity requirements, that the facility has to be dispatchable, and it has to maintain or improve the reliability and resilience of the grid. Those requirements would be stricken. Now, the retirement or abandonment would be prohibited unless the utility demonstrates that the utility will be able to meet the current and reasonably anticipated future resource adequacy requirements of the SPP. So that's the first requirement. The following requirements would be maintained that the abandonment or retirement does not harm utilities customers. Then you see on page 4 of the balloon amendment, what this is proposing is to strike that final requirement that the retirement cannot be based on environmental, social, and governance goals. It has to be for economic purposes. So that's stricken. There would only be 2 requirements under this balloon, that it has to essentially meet anticipated future resource needs of the SPP and not expected to harm customers. The last kind of final change that is noteworthy is just the provisions on page 5 and 6 relating to the KCC report. This is just clarifying that the report will look back to the preceding calendar year rather than all years, and then it does clean up a few pieces of information with regards to that report. Mr. Chair, that's
Where did this come from? Who originated it?
That might be a question for some of the parties. I'm not exactly sure who is working on this.
Okay.
But one person may be speaking.
Okay, we'll get into that later. Any questions on the balloon? Like I said, I just wanted to get it out in everybody's hands at this point in time. So, okay. Moving on, we've got Reagan McLeod from Kansas Electric Co-ops. Welcome to the committee, Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Reagan McLeod with Kansas Electric Cooperatives. I got to confess, I was expecting the comfort of the podium to hide behind for my first time testifying in front of Representative Hoheisel. So bear with me as I work my way through this. But you've got my written testimony in front of you. We appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of Senate Bill 455. I'll clarify from the beginning on the work on the Senate side, we testified in support of the contents of Senate Bill 456. We didn't take a position on Senate Bill 455, but we're appreciative that we were kept in the loop as the Senate side worked through the process. And so my comments are largely related to the contents of Senate Bill 456 and the reason for our support on the underlying bill. But on both the national and state level, co-ops have really been highlighting the importance of reliability. More on the national side, that we've identified supply chain issues, permitting restrictions, federal regulatory overreaches, and beyond as the most imminent threat to reliability. But on more specific to the state side, leading into the 2024 session and working with our membership, our members identified preserving reliability as our number one priority leading into the 2024 legislative session. We identified several specific things that we highlight as the most important steps we can take to preserve and prioritize reliability, including a diverse generation mix, investments into physical and cyber securities, and crucial timely investments into electric infrastructure. All of which, though, are conscious decisions that are made in the name of reliability, and with reliability as the background in that decision-making process. So we saw the contents of the bill that's before you today as one of those conscious decisions to prioritize and maintain reliability. And so we appreciate efforts to maintain that crucial baseload power. We also identified some of the questions and factors that were in Senate Bill 456 as reasonable questions that should be asked when you're considering the retirement of baseload generation. The same way that we consider reliability at the top of our minds when we established that baseload power in the first place, we found it stood to reason to ask similar questions when we think about retiring them. So we appreciate the legislature focusing on reliability this session and in this bill. We appreciate all the other industry stakeholders for keeping us in the loop as this bill was put together on the Senate side. And we appreciate the legislature continuing to ask questions with the idea of reliability in the back of our minds. So with that, I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Sure. Thank you very much, Reagan. Any questions? Not seeing any. I appreciate you being here. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. Next up is David Nickel with Curb. David, if you want to try the podium mic and see if maybe it's completely dead now. Okay, don't worry about it. IT said it's toast. Okay. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Delperdang and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to Senate Bill 455. My name is David Nickel. I'm Consumer Counsel with the CURB. And I'll be brief. I would like to echo the remarks of all the proponents who have spoken before me. I also want to thank those proponents for allowing CURB to be part of the team that refined Senate Bill 455 and 456 into the present form before you. And that includes the balloon amendment that is now before the committee. We speak as a proponent of these bills. We have looked at it from the interest of residential and small commercial ratepayers in Kansas. We think this bill furthers reliability and reasonable prices of energy to these consumers. And therefore, we do support this bill and ask for its passage favorably out of this committee. It's my last time probably for speaking before this committee this year. I want to thank the committee for their yeoman's work in considering all the energy bills that were before us and in the interest of residential and small commercial ratepayers. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, David. Any questions for Mr. Nickel? Not seeing any. Thank you for being here again. I do appreciate it. And we already heard from Eric Stafford. Anyone else out there would like to speak as a proponent? Not seeing any. We'd have one opponent, and that would be Zach Pastora with the Kansas Sierra Club. Welcome to the committee, sir.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. Honored to be before you as always. Zach Pastora, representing the Kansas Sierra Club Environmental Organization, and no surprise here that an environmental organization would be opposed to legislation that would potentially prolong the continuance of fossil fuel plants for our state. I have a few comments on the specifics and the mechanics of the bill, then just a general comment at the end. 5 would be unnecessary. Okay, first and foremost, to think, the reality check here is that utilities, our Kansas Corporation Commission, and the Southwest Power Pool all consider reliability in their evaluations, right? They're considering the costs, impacts to ratepayers, the economics in their evaluations today. This bill, may arguably affirm that idea, but it's going to happen no matter what, whether you pass or not pass this bill. Okay, so let's get that straight. We're not going to retire any coal plants in Kansas unless it's economical to do so, unless we have the reliable generation to do so. Okay, so let's get that clear. What it could do is that it could default a default position that we're against transitioning against costly or outdated energy infrastructure, and as it is now, would require additional check boxes and red tape and block potentially smart energy investment to help us transition away. As it is now, the Senate bill provides an all or nothing approach in the sense that if you don't check all those regulatory check boxes, you might have a single element that causes forces the commission to say we can't retire this plant, even when there's a balance of factors that say it's economical or in the best interest of Kansas to do so. So that's the first point. The second point is that this could potentially handcuff our Kansas Corporation Commission, our regulators, from assigning the most fair and accurate cost recovery for those idle or standby coal plants. Okay, we have a situation that we're allowing full cost recovery for coal plants that run on average less than half the time in Kansas, and certainly for Evergy's coal plants. Okay, at what point, and there's no definition of low capacity factor, do we allow to have these standby coal plants for a worst case scenario, like an extreme storm? And so the example I think about is at my own house when I got what I call the beater, my old Buick, 94 Buick LeSabre sitting out there in the drive. I said, well, I should keep it around just in case, my other car isn't working that day, or, maybe I got a friend in town, maybe they might want a ride, or someone might need that clunker car. It's got over 200,000 miles on it, doesn't get very good gas mileage, and is basically rusting the driveway for a worst case scenario where I might need it. Okay, Yet I continue to pay all the costs that go into that: operation, maintenance costs, insurance costs. There is a cost to keeping that clunker out there. And so that's my argument here. I'm not saying we don't utilize our coal plants at some point in Kansas. I'm just saying every time we do so, we pay a price premium as ratepayers for that power. Okay, so price premium. Every time we can utilize renewable resources, or the resource we're not utilizing in Kansas very much, which is saving people energy. Remember, we're second worst of all states in helping people save energy, as ranked by Energy Efficiency Scorecard out there. We could be doing more to help provide low-cost energy power that is not fossil-based. Okay, so that's our contingent here and why we're against that. There's no determination here if we're going to say 20% runtime for coal plants is fine, 5%, or even 1%. So that's the problem with the bill. Fortunately, I think the amendment helps clear a lot of that out. It takes a lot of the regulatory checklists there in Section 4, items A through D, specifically the small i's. It would be good to take that out. But what if we could allow the KCC to say, hey, we'll pay you full cost for the coal plants when they're running, but we're going to pay you a diminished cost, or lesser costs when they're just standing idle. So those are something that could be in the best interests of ratepayers for the state, and this could potentially complicate that. Just a couple more things is that, I have to say it, I think a lot of us are thinking about it.
we're certainly not talking about it enough, and that's the impact of climate change. And we struggle as an environmental organization while we continue to absorb the costs of extreme weather impacts caused by climate change, not just us here in Kansas, but across the United States and across the world. We have a really hard time prolonging fossil fuel plants that are polluting our atmosphere and causing it harder for us to make the transition to a future for kids and future generations to have the same opportunity that we had as far as a stable planet and climate. Okay, so I'll just say that, you know, we have coal units that are producing more than 12,000 hot air balloons of carbon pollution every day into the atmosphere. I know we're just a small piece of the pie. Okay, and that's not just a Pi Day reference here, but we need to do more to step up our responsibility on what we're contributing to the atmosphere, what we're contributing in terms of pollution emissions out there. So I'll just say that we do have opportunities. We are one of the best states for resources. If this is a policy statement, I don't think we should bank on buying Wyoming coal for the future of our energy system here in Kansas. We're second to last in energy efficiency. The lowest cost, greenest form of energy generation we can have is that we don't use. And then also we're one of the top 10 states for the sun, yet the bottom for solar energy. Okay, so all those things that say we would support the amendment, we'll go along with it. We agree to disagree on the rest of the bill, saying that it's unnecessary, but happy to answer any questions and urge you to give some consideration. We'll continue to work with the stakeholders and with yourselves on developing an energy roadmap for our state, where we get more of our energy that is low cost and local, that might provide better economic investment for our state than Wyoming's coal. Thank you.
All right. Questions, Representative Berquist.
Thank you, Zach, for your testimony. In slight reference to the pie thing, we have about 0.42% of the Southwest Power Pool as of this moment is depending on solar. And if they could depend on more, they probably would. But the fact is, it's not in the picture today. And I think the picture that's being dealt with today in this bill is to deal with the real-time, year in and year out, cold, hot spells that these folks have to deal with in the real world of today. The real world of tomorrow is what you're talking about. But the real world of today is the dependency for us as consumers, as a nation, is that we still have to depend on fossil fuels. And because of that, they're setting up a structure that still protects those. And we can talk about some more ethereal things later. And they're not, I don't diminish the importance of them. I just diminish the urgency of them at this time in regards to this kind of bill. I appreciate the bill.
Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Zach, I appreciate your idea of keeping the world clean. I feel the same way. And as far as climate change, I have seen it in my lifetime. So maybe we're just going through a cycle, but there has been a change in my lifetime that I've seen. But until China and India and them change, it doesn't matter what we do. I mean, because they are such super polluters that we're just a very small part. But I do appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate your comments. So thank you very much.
Representative Schreiber. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Any further questions? Representative O'Halverson.
Thank you very much for your testimony today. You did say that you actually support the amendment, but not the bill. I mean, if you support the amendment, why would you not move to neutral, be neutral about the whole bill then?
That's a good question. I thought about that. We support the amendment because it takes a lot of what I call the regulatory checklist criteria out. It just basically goes to adequacy requirements, resource adequacy requirements, So we support the amendment because it makes the policy better. We just feel like we don't think the bill is necessary. Okay. And two, we think the spirit of the bill and doubling down on our fossil fuel resources sends the wrong message. And I don't deny that those resources are what we depend on today and what our regulators are going to ensure reliability of. But at the same time, we should be having those policy discussions on how more lower cost local energy supplies create more energy independence here in Kansas, and what those benefits might be to the state at large, let alone to ratepayers. So that's kind of where I'm saying. So good question, but yeah, we'll support the amendment. I think it does definitely makes the bill better.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions? All right. Thank you, Zach. Appreciate you being here. Any other opponents would like to say anything? Not seeing any. Moving on to neutral, we have Jeff McClanahan, KCC. Welcome to the committee, sir. Make sure the mic's turned on.
Sorry about that.
There you go.
Zach turned it off on me. He didn't want me to speak. Good morning, committee. My name is Jeff McClanahan. I'm the Director of the Utilities Division for the Kansas Corporation Commission. Appreciate the opportunity to appear before you this morning. Staff testified neutral to both SB 455 and SB 456 in the Senate. We did have some issues with 456 in terms of the language that's been talked about in Section 1.4c. We felt like that was overly prescriptive, and my testimony outlines some of the issues that we had with that. The balloon amendments that you have received this morning did address that. I think the question was asked earlier, who was involved in that? It was primarily the same stakeholders as was involved in the HB 2527 discussions. When we met for HB 2527, we also discussed this bill. By way of background, in terms of the retirements of fossil fuel fired generation, staff is concerned with reliability along with everyone else. It's becoming a bigger and bigger issue as more and more renewables are transitioned into the grid. We held a series of work studies last year designed to educate around potential technologies and where we were with the grid. And we thought about opening a general investigation that would have required all of our jurisdictional utilities to come in for a determination on a retirement. During that process, though, the Southwest Power Pool got closer to changing the way it accredits its accreditation methodology for capacity within the footprint. So in the past, it's been based primarily on nameplate capacity, and now they're moving more to performance, past performance and reliability aspects that they're going to include in that determination of how you accredit both renewables and fossil fuel fired generation. So with SPP's process, we got comfortable enough that it was going to become pretty difficult for any utility to prematurely retire a fossil fuel fired generation prematurely. So we decided we did not need the general investigation. So as a part of this bill, if when you look at the balloon amendments, we stripped out a lot of what was in 4C and just put it back to the utility needs to meet the accreditation standards from its regional transmission organization. And we felt like that would address our concerns and make it difficult for any utility for various reasons to prematurely retire any fossil fuel generation. So wanted to provide that background to the committee so you have an understanding of what some of the changes you see in those amendments are. And those changes did satisfy us in terms of our issues that we had previously on 456. The rest of it was just cleanup in those amendments. So we're satisfied, and we appreciate all the stakeholders' work in reaching a consensus on that. And I think with that, I've covered everything. So I'd be happy to stand for questions.
All right. I appreciate your testimony and committee. Now we know who offered the balloon, and any questions on it, you're welcome to discuss there too. Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate your input and wisdom, Mr. McClanahan. During Mr. Pastora's testimony, he explained to us that, at least as he views it, that the commission already takes into account whether or not takes into account the economic impact as well as the reliability impact in evaluating, in this instance, coal plants and the necessity to keep them online and or to retire them. And I understand that there are changes in the reporting requirements for the KCC to the legislature, but would this really change this legislation? Would it change what the KCC does when it's evaluating whether or not coal plants should remain online, be taken offline, etc.? Because it does seem to me it's the same basic considerations in the statute that you already utilize. Can you educate me a little bit?
I don't know that you need to be educated. I think that's factually correct. We already have the authority and these to evaluate through a predetermination filing, which is currently, which this is through a predetermination. So the one nuance there is no, we currently have not espoused authority to require any retirement to come before the commission. That could have been done and what we were considering through the general investigation to have required that. But with SVP's changes, I don't see how you're going to do that. So, but you're correct that the requirements that are in this bill, we have the authority to do today, and that is what we would do and will do in any evaluation.
If I might inquire, just by way of follow-up, Mr. Chair, and you may have just answered this, but we did hear Evergy's, I believe it was Evergy's representative, or perhaps the Chamber's representative this morning, say that this bill is in part designed or intended to prevent, for lack of a better word, third parties from petitioning the KCC to prematurely, quote unquote, close down coal plants. And I think you just said that y'all never considered that. I don't know. How does that work? Is it possible under the current structure of the law for me to come in and say, I'm an interested party and they don't need to be running that coal plant anymore. They ought to decommission it, and even better, make the shareholders pay the undepreciated cost and the cost of decommissioning. Can you do that now? Is that something we need to stop from happening? I shouldn't say, is that something we need to stop? That's a policy question.
Right.
To help me with that.
Right. So, as I understood the intent of that section of the bill, it was to prevent arguments within a rate case of whether or not a fossil fuel fired generation asset, primarily coal, that has a very low capacity factor, or maybe setting idle just on a seasonal basis so it runs only for reliability purposes, from being removed from rates or discounted, as Mr. Pistorius indicated. So those arguments can be made by interveners in a rate case, and they have to be addressed within that rate case. So that's a pretty tall order to get to the full evaluation of that within a rate case, because there's so many other things going on, obviously, and we have a 240-day deadline. So it would be better to deal with those issues outside of a rate case. Not that we couldn't get there in a rate case, but so that was my understanding of the primary purpose of that, was to eliminate the risk per se from the utilities perspective of having that having an adverse order from the commission in a rate case.
Mr. McClanahan, I appreciate you educating me, even if you thought you weren't. And Mr. Chair, I do subscribe to the general philosophy that the less the legislature does, the better. Thank you.
I appreciate your comments and questions. Representative Roth.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 4 of the balloon amendment, it's crossing out reference to ESG. And so I'm just curious as to or does ESG play in decision making?
So, from the commission's perspective, unless ESG were to be mandated legally, that's not a consideration we're going to take into account. Reliability is first and foremost, and to Mr. Pistorius, some of his comments, I would suggest there's some nuances there in the sense that when it comes to reliability, you want to select the lowest cost option and ensure reliability, but you're not going to make a decision on reliability just to reduce rates, right? You are going to ensure that you have sufficient generation that will be there when it's needed, regardless of cost. So when you take that basis into consideration, then ESG really has no part in our decision making as far as we're concerned, unless we're mandated to factor that in.
Thank you so much for your
Sir.
Thank you, Chairman.
Mm-hmm. Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. McClanahan. Ask you the same question I posed to Mr. Zakura about not just limiting this to fossil fuel plants, but also nuclear, since they're a baseload plant too. Is that a concern or issue with staff or commission?
No, sir. The thing I don't know, as I sit here today, right, is with a nuclear plant, you have the operational agreement with the NRC and you have a defined retirement date, and that any extension of that retirement date has to be approved by the NRC. So a little bit different on them, but if it were to be rolled in, that would not cause us any concern. We already have to go through that process anyway.
Okay. Kind of the situation I was looking at is there have been some premature closures of nukes in the country based on a number of different reasons, but so that's the only reason for my question. Thank you.
We would not have an issue with that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions from Mr. Clanahan? Not seeing any. Thank you again for being here. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, I will make one comment before you leave, though, but I talked to Pete, also with KCC yesterday in my office a little bit. Next year, hopefully we're all back. I do want to take a look next year at what can we do as a state to make small modular nuclear reactors a little more friendly, to maybe get something here, possibly to start replacing coal in the future. And that's just something I've got in a vision, and think about it over the summer, and I would appreciate it.
Will do. And we are looking at another work study related to coal retirements and small modular reactors. And so we'll let the committee know when those work studies are coming up, and they'll be out on our YouTube channel as well. So we'll be discussing the technology and viability of that and everything else sometime this summer, and then we'll be happy to follow up with the committee later on.
Sounds good. Appreciate it. Any further people wishing to speak as a neutral? Not seeing any, I will go ahead and close the hearing on Senate Bill 455. I think I'd mentioned this a while back, but Senator Fabi, who is my counterpart on the Senate side, and I both wrote a joint letter to the Southwest Power Pool a while back. We were looking for information on future regional electric transmission projects, and especially the transmission cost allocations. And they're going to be in here on Thursday, 21st, coming up. Next Tuesday, we're looking at possibly final action on this one, on the bill you just heard. I'm still kind of hashing some things through. Representative Neighbor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I have a point of personal privilege?
Absolutely.
We have two very young visitors today who I think in the future, based on their parents' behavior, may be either politicians or interested in energy, but they have sat through some of the most thrilling testimony today and have hardly moved, only 3 yawns. And so I'd like to thank them for being a part of our audience, and that would be Kimberly Gincher's son and of the 4, I think. So thank you for being here.
Actually, you kind of beat me to the punch. I was going to, I don't know if I want to, what I'd like to do is have Kimberly stand up and introduce us to her staff that she brought with us. So, we got this little embarrassment going on out there too.
Oh no, this doesn't. Actually, maybe it does work.
Yeah, give it a try.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I do have my one of my bosses, Mariner, who is our second oldest, and Evelyn Grace Taylor, who is our third. So this is their spring break, and Big Brother will be here in a little bit when track is done, and baby sister is at a county commission meeting in Great Bend. So happy spring break to them.
Let us know when they want to testify to the committee sometime. So thank you for being here. All right. With that, I believe I've got all the messages out I wanted to get through, and I will say we are adjourned for the day.